Hi everybody, thanks for having me. Try the eggs. Quite good. Yeah, so today I just want to sort of preface the fact that I'm down as the depreciation update, but so that you all stay, I'm just going to let you know I'm not just going to talk about tax legislation. I will talk about it, but I've got some other stuff as well. So my intention today is to talk firstly about construction costs, what's happening in the construction space, why that matters for the industry. I want to share some industry first insights into investor behaviour, and then that awful stuff at the end. That's the whole reason that I'm here, because that's the most exciting stuff for me. But before we actually kick off, I want to sort of take the pulse of the room. I want to get some audience participation. I can see everyone's terribly excited about this. But I'm going to share some data that we first released pre-pandemic in 2019, and that is the average distance that property investors buy from where they live. So we've got A, B and C. I've made it very simple because I know many of you are hungover, present company accepted. Is it A, less than 50 kilometres? So they're buying a property less than 50 k's from where they live. Is it between 50 and 200, B? Or is it 200 plus? That's C. So who's thinking A? Who's thinking that the old adage that investors, thank you sir, unsophisticated, they like to be able to buy something around the corner from where they live so they can point at it and go, I own that, I've won at life. Or I want to look at that in case my tenant starts a meth lab. We've got a couple of A's. B, anyone for B? Good, there's a lot of B energy, thank you. I think that's probably about the point where it's reasonable to assume that people might actually go and physically look at it themselves, and then probably C is 200 plus, where maybe they're relying on a buyer's agent or realestate.com, or just winging it. Anyone for winging it? Good. A buyer's agent who wings it. Tell that to his clients. Now, I'm not going to tell you what the answer is until a little bit later because I want your attention. Let's talk about construction. So Cordell's construction cost index has basically shown a print of 0.8% the first quarter of this year and the last quarter of last year as well. So it's telling us that construction costs have moderated. Now, for anyone that was paying attention during the pandemic, we saw really like a 20% increase in construction costs over that period of time. And the story really was materials. Materials is where the huge price increases came from, and a lot of that was tied to the fact that the majority of our materials come from overseas, and of course shipping costs went absolutely through the roof. So shipping costs are really back to where they were pre-pandemic, and now it's really a story about construction labour. So the annual growth rate's 2.8%. For 2024, which is the smallest since 2007, and below the pre-COVID decade average of 4%. So whilst it doesn't sort of seem like it out there, anyone that's trying to get a tradie to do anything, like for 20 grand you used to be able to get a kitchen, now it's a plumber's call-out fee. The data is saying that it's sort of going to be okay, but labour is the real problem. We kind of need around about 90,000 trades in the next, well, probably by the end of this breakfast would be nice. And the trouble is that the construction labour that we have is not necessarily going into building the homes that we desperately need. A lot of it is going to the juicy projects where you can actually make more money, which is the government pipeline of infrastructure. We've got some huge projects on the go, Western Sydney Airport, that bloody big underground rail thing in Victoria, all sorts of things that is pulling the trades away from construction. And one thing that people don't realise as well is that natural disasters are a real problem for construction labour because they pull people away, because the insurance companies, that's where the money is. I've had national home builders, some of the biggest names, tell me, we can't get roofers. I'm like, what do you mean? If you're a roofer, you're a golden ticket. There's so much work. But when they're getting double the hourly rate working on the insurance stuff, that's part of the problem, because I suppose you need to think about the cost to actually accommodate someone while their home is being repaired. So the insurance companies are happy to pay a huge amount. Does anyone remember the press release about the 1.2 million homes in the next 5 years. Wasn't that a good gag, that one? Yeah, there's a problem with that. I'll come to that in a second. This is some of our data on the cost to build a house. So this is not necessarily going out to market and saying, I want to build a house, this is what it is. This is actually what our investors are paying. So the people that have engaged us to do a tax depreciation schedule that actually build their investment property, which is a small subset, but it's a reasonable one. These are the prices. So 2018, 265 grand was the average cost. We can actually see that moderated a little bit all the way to 2020, and then that's really where it kicked off. So between 2020, 225 grand to 354 in 2023. And it makes me kind of think, well, there's something wrong with that data. Maybe we're building better houses, maybe we're building bigger houses, but we get at actually the gross floor area. So we know that the houses are comparable. So construction costs have actually influenced investor behaviour as well. So in 2021, we found that 37% of property investors were undertaking improvements to their investment property straight after purchasing it. And that's actually moderated to 21% in 2023. So not only are less people making improvements, they're actually spending less as well, as you can see here. So in 2021, the average spend was about 30 grand. In 2023, it's 16 grand. So that's probably that plumber's call out fee, and then they decide not to do the work. Here we are, the 5-year goal. Technically, that's supposed to start 1 July. So we can see these are the house build numbers in the green there, starting over at the left. And then you can see the divergence point of where we actually need to be. And the red line is the Master Builders Association's estimate of what will happen. So we're asking, the politician said, we're going to build 1.2 million homes. Well, they're not going to do anything. It's the builders and the developers that are going to do it. But they're asking something to happen that's only really ever happened once before, but they want it to happen 5 years in a row. At a time where we've had materials issues, we've got a huge labour shortage, we've got high interest rates, and a lot of projects just aren't stacking up like they used to. The pipeline of large apartment style builds is actually really quite diminished. So it begs the question, is it over before it's even begun? I think it is. Let's talk about investor behaviour. So we'll park construction for the moment. So this is our data on what the average property investor is spending on houses, units and townhouses. So $661,000 is the average amount that a residential property investor is spending on their investment property. There's not a lot of money. It sort of begs the question, well, where are they getting properties at this kind of price point? So 2023 really for me was all about affordability. To achieve that metric, you can't do it in Sydney, you can't do it in Melbourne. You used to be able to do it in Brisbane, you can't really do that anymore. So it's really about places like Perth. Now, are they buying new properties? Do you remember back in 2017 we had ScoMo? It was before he became Prime Minister and before he started trying to put out bushfires from Hawaii, which didn't end well for him. He was the treasurer, and on the 9th of May 2017, a very nice glass of Shiraz turned to ash in my mouth when he said that we're not going to be able to claim plant and equipment depreciation deductions on anything except new properties. So I think that actually fed into the data. Like people kind of think like, oh, do I want a property that's going to go up in value or do I want to not pay tax? The second one, I hate tax. I don't care about the investment fundamentals. I don't want to pay tax. So we saw a lot of people buying newer properties, but you can see the trend. I think that's a story of education, right? So people are realising that established properties tend to outperform new properties, and I think it's a construction cost story as well, where it's just actually a little bit too expensive to be building new properties. So from basically 46% down to 11% in 2023. What about houses versus units? Units used to be very popular with investors. In 2019, half of the depreciation schedules we did for residential property were units. In 2023, it's 16%. And I think that all kind of started when we had some really lovely media stories, heartwarming they were. Homeowners and tenants evicted on Christmas Eve, you know, mascot towers, opal towers, flammable cladding. They love that in Victoria. I know it's cold, but that's a bit ridiculous. So units have become much less popular for property investors. That's probably a trend that's going to have to reverse a little bit at some point, because the price differential between houses and units is now quite huge in certain pockets. But yeah, very interesting to see that units have become very unpopular. Now remember, I talked about where can you buy something for 650 grand. Q1 of 2022, 9% of our property investors bought in Perth. Fast forward 12 months to Q1 of 2023, it's 30%. Absolutely astounding it was. And we've just crunched the numbers for Q1 of 2024, and it's just absolutely insane. Nearly half of investors are buying in WA. And I think Terry spoke at the breakfast in Melbourne about indicators pointing to the top of the market back then. I think that we're really seeing that continue to grow based on kind of like a gold rush mentality. People are still making money, and it's kind of a self-perpetuating prophecy over there. But I'm really kind of cautious for people that are going like, oh, I heard Perth is happening. I'm like, well, maybe it's happened. So people have got to be real careful. All right, so now we've got the data point. How far do people buy from where they live? We first crunched this data in 2019, and I wanted to challenge the notion that investors are sort of stupid and they'll buy around the corner from where they live. Because you ask them, you say like, oh, why did you buy in the suburb where you live? And like, oh, we know the area. I'm like, oh yeah, so do you know like the main employers and the historical growth rates and the percentage of renters versus owner occupiers? And they go, no, I just know where the good coffee is. And, you know, you don't buy in that street because there's a few junkies and a bit of graffiti. But most investors, I think, are not like that. And the first time we crunched the number, it was, who was C? 293 kilometres. That was a huge surprise to me personally, to be that far. That people on average are buying 293 kilometres from where they live. That was pre-pandemic, and I didn't know the pandemic was going to happen. I had nothing to do with meat markets in China, but it was actually great because it got us to show, well, what was it like before and what changed during the pandemic? And what we found is that it jumped to 559 kilometres, because I think data has kind of been democratised, and there's people like buyer's agents that can help people buy around the country with confidence. And of course, you sort of couldn't leave your house. You can't really go and inspect anything anyway. So people were kind of relying on the internet to find the best markets in all of Australia. And in 2022, they kept going, 857 kilometres. In some countries, you've left the country if you've gone that far. But in 2023, look at that, 1,500 kilometres, absolutely insane. Now, what's 1,500 kilometres away or more? Did someone say Canberra? Perth. I think it's like, I haven't put it into Google Maps, but it's more than that. It's maybe 3,500. It's a terrible drive. People have told me I wouldn't do it. Fly private. But 1,500 kilometres, that tells the story of Perth for me, because most property investors are eastern seaboard, right? That's where most of the volume is. So, I mean, that's an astounding statistic that we just love sharing. All right, so we've done construction, we've done investor behaviour. It's my favourite bit. Lock the doors. Tax legislation and depreciation updates. I've got to do what it said on the tin. What's changed in depreciation? Well, actually, nothing, really. So is that long enough, Nicola? Probably not. Every year they update the tax depreciation effective lives. You know, this wonderful 181-page document that says carpet has an effective life of 8 years. And us quantity surveyors look at that and go, ooh, it used to be 10. Whoa, things are changing. My favourite one is that carpet in, say, places like pubs has 2 different effective lives, one for dining areas, one for drinking areas. So someone at the ATO has kind of said, wouldn't the carpet wear out more in places where people are drinking and spilling stuff and tripping over? And they've gone, yeah, we should put 2 different things in there. I want to be in the room for those conversations. Especially the one where they said, all right, we need this new category called plastic safety screens, in brackets, including sneeze guards. I love the word sneeze guard being in an ATO document. You know, so if you went to Coles during the pandemic, you realise that there's this big plastic screen in front of people. That's kind of what they're talking about there. So that's not in any residential properties, it's in commercial properties. So if you own one and you've installed a sneeze guard, you'll be pleased to know that you can write that off in 2 years. So I've provided value, I think, I hope, probably not. My personal favourite actual category for effective lives is the ATO came up with in 2019 a new one called digital peepholes. And we all kind of went, what? What they were talking about was video intercoms, but they sort of got it wrong in the creepiest way. A digital peephole? Like, honestly. And yeah, that remains my favourite. I know you didn't ask, but you got that anyway. What has actually really changed is that our institute, the Australian Institute of Quantity Surveyors, has issued an industry white paper that talks about best practice for providers and for clients as well. So clients can go somewhere and say, look, how do I pick from that guy with a cheap haircut and glasses or somebody else who's less likely to speak at these events, because I sort of just be silly and they keep inviting me back, I don't know why. This white paper, the most important thing I think there, and this is a real battleground for our industry that I wanted to share, is that when it's appropriate to get an inspection done, and the answer really is always. There's a few quantity surveyors out there that are saying that they can do it from online. I was at the Accounting Business Expo. Surprised none of you were there, actually. It's the feel-good conference of the summer. Absolutely wild. Someone came to me and they said, oh, I got a report done on a service station and I looked at the numbers and they were all wrong. And they actually put a photo of the service station on the report. But it was a service station that had recently been demolished and a new one had been rebuilt in that section. I mean, that's absolutely disgusting to think that that happens in my industry. But, you know, that kind of shows part of the problem. Our job is to forensically go and look at a property and say what's happened, what's changed, what's the history of this building. I've stood in properties before with owners and said, oh, look, this is where the back wall used to be. And they sort of look, really? And then say, oh, come and have a look underneath. And you can see steps leading up to the middle of the house, which is not a traditional way to enter a building, through the floor. So, you know, that's the most important depreciation update, I suppose, is that, you know, inspecting a property is mandatory unless there are a couple of conditions. So if you build a brand new property yourself and you have the exact construction costs, you don't really need any estimating. So if we have the exact cost, we have plans, we have a schedule of finishes, then we can do it. But often those schedules say stainless steel appliances. Now, are they Technica or Gaggenau? You know, there could be $30,000 of difference. Or carpet to living areas, like, can you live in a hallway? I don't know, connects some of the living. It's not always clear. So I would just encourage anyone that's getting tax depreciation done that they need to get an inspection done. According to our data, this is the average depreciation deductions we find for residential property, as at the last time we crunched it, which was last week, 9,936. Would have been nice to be 10, wouldn't it? Yeah, almost got there. We might have another look at that, see if we can target some high net worth people buying some stuff that isn't in Perth. Would be a nice change. But, you know, it's a pretty significant number because there's a lot of people that were listening to ScoMo on the 9th of May 2017 as well and basically thought, well, depreciation died that night. But, you know, that's important to note that it hasn't. Now, this is something that, it's a lot of numbers on a slide here, and I know it's early, but I'll walk you through it. We looked at 1,000 residential property investors that came through our doors, and we found that 6.7% of them waited so long to get a depreciation schedule that they actually missed out on deductions. So some of you might know you can back claim 2 financial years. So we're talking more than that 2-year back claim. So 6.7% doesn't sound like a lot, but on average they missed $20,537. Now that's not on my screen or up there, it's up here because it keeps me up nights tossing and turning in a cold sweat because that money went to the government. And they spent it on a diesel submarine contract and rescinded that and upset the French, and then they went nuclear and they're buying giant scissors and they're building rail projects that are $2 billion over budget. Crazy stuff. The government's not good with money. And I think if you don't want it yourself, give it to charity. Like they're going to do something better than the government will. So because I know there's a couple of journalists in the room, journalists love clickbait. So we extrapolated that over the investor population at the time. And it worked out that if you put 6.7 times every investor in the country times 20,537, you get $2.88 billion worth of unclaimed deductions just out there floating in the ether. So I'm on a mission to reduce that number, and I invite you to join with me. Isn't it nice? We can all sort of join together on this mission to deny the ATO federal tax revenue. Anyone from the ATO? Thank Christ for that. The good news is that education's working. In the old days, 6 years ago, it was 691 days from settlement to getting in touch with us. So we tracked that. And this year it's 70 days. And I have to thank people in the room who are educating their clients about the benefits of tax depreciation. And here are some of the benefits. Look at this as a sales pitch now. But wait, there's more. These are our ROI. So in the first full year of claim, we're getting back 14.5 times the cost of our report in deductions, and the reports last for 40 years, so it's 370x. So I'm a terrible salesman. I'm just lucky that I have a bloody good product. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a business person, because our job is to put money back in investors' pockets and not the ATO. Again, it's a pretty big enemy to pick, but anyway, what can you do? Here's a slide my marketing people begged me not to put in because it's an ugly house. It's in Edgeworth, New South Wales, just outside of Newcastle, and a very old property with a granny flat. And the numbers don't leap off the page, just under $3,000 worth of deductions, but it's fairly typical of one of the average sort of, first investment properties that people are buying, probably in that sub 650K mark, but over the life of the property, we're talking 100 grand. This is the one the marketing people want, isn't it? Mr. Percival's property, I think this is. Noosaville, premium townhouse, 2.35 mil. First year claim, 61 grand, and over the life of it, nearly $1 million. So these are the lovely ones we like to put on our brochures. Even this one, Epping. Commercial, of course, there's more categories for commercial. At least you're leaving the room knowing that sneeze guards are one of them. So if you go home to your significant other or the office, what did you learn? Well, sneeze guards are a thing. That'll make you popular. First year claim, $132,000 in the first year. And you can see the total deductions very close to the purchase price for this one, because with commercial property often it's on the majority of the parcel of land, so we can get some great deductions there. Here's a very modest commercial property in Garbutt, Queensland, built in 1993, 273 square metres, and $13,000 in the first year. And a report like this might cost $1,200, $1,000, something like that. A couple of renovations, which is important as well. So my intention was to share a little bit of an update in construction and why that matters. And I think why that matters is that we're not building enough. We can't really hit that target. That has implications for the rental crisis that we have, the affordability crisis that we have, which is in the media every 5 seconds. And it really looks like none of that's going away. So there's a lot of pressure on property. I think if we finally get some interest rate cuts, I'm really interested to hear Cameron on that soon, then there could be a real fire under the backside. And the investor behaviour stuff, I just love sharing that with everybody. And then depreciation, you learnt, go and do an inspection and sneeze guards. They're your 2 takeaways. So if I provided value, connect with me on LinkedIn. If I didn't, my name's Kieran Clare, and I'll see you next time. Thank you very much.